All right, before I get into talking about the project, does anyone have any questions on anything that they're working on? No? All right, cool. So today we're going to talk about the READMEs, but first to say a few things about the blog requirement. So I believe it says somewhere that the blog requires like 1,000 to 3,000 words, I think. Well, that's not necessary. I'd say like something more realistic is like 500 to 700 words. So yeah, in case, I think on one of the rubrics or somewhere there's that requirement. So definitely don't have to do 3,000 word thing for your blog. In terms of what the blog should be about, you can go one of two routes, I think. One, you can do a complete outline of your project and talk about like, your entire process of like data cleaning, of putting tables together, followed by doing the analysis and answering your questions. Or you can choose to zoom in on a specific part of your problem, of your project. So for example, if let's say, you want to write something about, I don't know, the technicalities behind doing joins, you can totally do that. You can do like a deep dive into like what it means to do like pandas joins. You can also talk about, maybe if you just wanted to talk about, I think, let's see, some examples are, you can talk about like just a data cleaning process, and you can use examples from your project to just, use as examples in your blog, and it can just be like a general like how to data clean blog. So it's really very open-ended. You can choose to write pretty much whatever you want as long as it has something to do with data science. If you don't want to write a blog about the project specifically, you can do that as well. Just know that you have to get that blog in with the project. But as long as you write something about data science that's like maybe about like 500 words at least, you're good to go. And in terms of blogs, I think I mentioned for the when we were first talking about blogs that it can be either on the Learn blogging platform or on Medium. And if you choose to do it on something that isn't the Learn platform, just send me the link to your blog, and I'll just so I know where it is. Any questions about that? Cool, awesome. Right now you still see the screen, right? All right, so I'm gonna start talking about the README. So what exactly is a README? A README is just something that appears on your GitHub page, and it's really what employers or recruiters will see when they're looking at your GitHub and looking at your projects. So my philosophy is that your README should be clear and concise and should like really like scream at their faces what it is that you're doing, and like, just show off your skills. Let me pull up one of the examples that I had. Let's see, it's called Module 1 Project Resources. Is that what I called it? Let me pull it up from our Slack channel. Give me a sec. Here we go. And here we have one of the examples. So this is a pretty good example. It kind of just summarizes the entire project, right? Like I think here they just chose to do like, what are the big questions, which is basically the prompt of this project. And then they had some like smaller hypotheses and things that they were looking into. So that is just like super clear right at the top of the README what their project was about and what it was looking at. This part I would say is a little bit less necessary, like processes and tools used. Definitely feel free to take any of the READMEs either of the READMEs that I put up here as guidelines for sure. This part, I wouldn't like go into it so in depth. I would just like mention really quickly where your data is from, where your data is coming from, what you are trying to look at, what factors you're looking at specifically, and then findings. I think this is going to be the bulk of your README. Really, it's going to be very, very similar to your PowerPoint presentation, actually. very commonly students just take what they have from their PowerPoint presentation and just put it in their README. Don't just copy and paste like literally your slides, but take the information from your PowerPoint presentation, because that should be the clear and concise information that you want on your README. And so very likely you're going to be like doing something very similar to this, just embedding your graphs onto your READMEs. Now I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do that later. But yeah, these folks, they just outline their 3 questions, put in their relevant visualizations, and done. And then final recommendations. The way you structure your README, it is very, it's really up to you. It's very subjective. I know some people actually like to put their recommendations at the top, just so like it's very, very clear right off the bat what they're recommending. And so your visualizations and your individual deep dives into each question are more contextualized. But that's really up to you. As long as it's clear and concise, that's all I'm looking for. And so with a README, yeah, you just have these sections. Any questions so far about like the content of a README before I talk about like how we're gonna do a README? Awesome. All right. So when you're writing a README, there are several different ways to go about it. I personally don't do this, but I'll talk about this first. So the first way you can do a README is doing it on GitHub. GitHub is a pretty decent, I guess, what's the word, interface to doing a README, where you can literally just click the little pencil button here, and you can edit your README just like this. Only downside is you can't really preview what you're doing as you're doing it. So let's say I want to do like, all right, overview, let's say, looking into profitability of movie genres, and then findings, and then conclusion. I'll also send out a cheat sheet with all of the syntax for all of these things. So don't worry about like having to know this by heart. But for the most part, any of the hashtag signs just means it's a title. And then biggest title is just 1 hashtag, and it goes down to 4 hashtags. And then the good thing about the GitHub interface is it lets you preview changes. I'll show you another way to do it that it's like a side-by-side thing that I use. But here you can just see what it'll look like. You have all these new things that I added, and this will be what it looks like on your page. So you can choose to do this extremely, extremely easy. All you do is commit changes right here. The only downside to why you may not want to do this is you have to remember to do a git pull on your project if you're updating something on GitHub, if that makes sense. So because you're updating this on the remote, you have to remember that when you're making edits on your local repository, that you have to do a git pull just to pull down these changes before you make changes. So yeah, doing this a lot more, I think is easier, but you do run into like some git problems if you just like forget. So there's that.
Can you copy and paste images into it?
Yeah, I'll talk about images after I talk about the next way that I do READMEs. But yeah, I'll definitely talk about that. The next way I do READMEs is I actually use Atom. And so we haven't really gone into this too much, but we will in the next mod. But Atom is a text editor. And you can download it off the internet. I think it's literally at atom.io. And you can see you can just download Atom. And Atom is actually where when you're productionalizing code or like scripting code, you can do an Atom. I use Atom. There are a lot of other ones out there that you might have heard of. There is VS Code, Visual Studio Code. I think that's what Anaconda comes with, or it might be Spider is another one. PyTorch is another very popular one. So I think all of these text editors have this same functionality. So whichever one you decide to use, that's fine. Just know that you're gonna have to use one eventually. So might as well just like pick your poison now. I like Atom because it's the simplest one, I think. It just doesn't have so many like things in the way. So let's see. Do I have my movie project here? Perfect. So what I'm gonna do is cd into movie project, which was the one that I just edited. And then I'm gonna do a git pull because I had edited it on GitHub. And you can see here, it got my README open. And right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open Atom. When I open Atom, I open over here, you can see that, I'm not sure if you guys can see this. Let me full screen this. You can still see the screen?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. All right, so over here you can see these are all of my files that were in the GitHub that just opened on the sidebar here. So you can see I have like my data files, I have like gitignore that I can also edit in Atom actually. I have this IPython notebook, but if you remember, I mentioned how like IPython notebooks are actually JSON files. So that's why it looks like this. And I have the README as well. So what I like about Atom is, I need to remember the shortcut. I think if you do like Command M, Option M, hold on, Control M. It's some comment, there it is. It is Control Shift M. I don't know what this is, but usually, there we go. All right. I don't know what that was, but this just lets me edit my Markdown side by side. So I can just straight up say like, my recommendations for Microsoft is that they blah, blah, blah. And so I just really like this because it updates side by side, like just, I think it's a lot more, I don't know, aesthetic and easier to work with. And plus it gets you used to using a text editor. I know for some people, like seeing code like this can get a little bit intimidating, but I think Markdown is a good place to start. So yeah, so these are the two main ways you can edit your Markdown, either in your text editor or on GitHub. Another way that I've seen some people do is actually on Jupyter Notebook. So I know if you do this, if you go into Jupyter and open up Jupyter, you can open up your README like this. The only downside is that it doesn't have the preview. So that's just the main downside to doing that. But if you don't want to like download a text editor, neither do you want to deal with like GitHub issues potentially, you can do this. But this one I feel like is a little bit more finicky. So definitely won't talk about this too much. Now with Markdowns, the main thing I wanted to point you guys to is this Markdown cheat sheet. I hope it's this one. Nope. Markdown cheat sheet, this one. And I'm gonna send you all the link right after this. But this is a page that I go to every time I need to write a Markdown. Main thing, it tells you all the different headers. So apparently it goes to 6, not just 4. What Sawyer you were mentioning was images. Images is, there are basically a bunch of different ways to do images, and this is the syntax. Basically, you have the text that you want, the alt text that you want. You don't really have to do that. It's just that, you know, when you hover over an image and sometimes the text comes up, I think if you like do this, there we go. You can see that that is the text that comes up. And then you just have to link your image. Here it is a URL, but you can also link the path to the image. So if you have your image in your GitHub repo, just link it to that path and then it'll bring up the image. So images is a big thing. Another thing, if you wanted to highlight a piece of code, you can use backticks. So if you have backticks around any phrases, just like the way that you would do like a bold or an italic, just put backticks around it and it would come up in this format. Let me zoom in a little bit. It'll look like this. Sometimes useful if you want to highlight like a specific variable that you're talking about, or maybe like a specific library that you're using or a function that you wanted to mention, I would use backticks. If you're doing a block of code, you can do code blocks that are just 3 backticks. What else? Oh, another really important thing is hyperlinks. So hyperlinks, let me scroll here. Hyperlinks, there we go, links. Different ways to do links. Square brackets for what the text is, round brackets to what the link is. Something that's helpful that you can do is you might want to link to the API that you were using. If you happen to do any additional research, which I don't expect you to do, you can link to that as well. Another kind of cool thing that you can do is if you notice, let's say this is a README. And if I, let's say, want to jump to a specific section, you can actually have those links there. So for example, if I click like our budget and revenue correlated, you can see in the URL bar here, there's a specific like header URL. So you can basically get a URL to jump to a specific section. So this is really good if your README you find is longer and you want to have like a mini like table of contents. Something like that would be really helpful, that you can link to a specific section in your README so that a reader can click and jump straight to that. Actually, very, very similar to what this article is doing over here. That I can just click and you can see that it is gonna basically jump down to the specific header. Because this page is actually a README. So yeah, I think that this cheat sheet will have everything that you need to write your READMEs. But I think for you guys, it'll just be links, images, headers, which are pretty straightforward. And yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
Hello.
Thank you.
No, I was actually thinking like README will be right created through the Jupyter notebook itself, right? Now, and since I missed the first few minutes, I don't know right, what were you discussing. But like for Markdown, it's the same thing, like which comes under the Jupyter notebook.
Yeah, actually, that's something that I kind of forgot to mention at the start. But Markdown is the language that's used to create READMEs. So I don't know if I don't know if I really talked about this, but when you have a Jupyter notebook, those cells with text are README cells, and the language that you're typing the README cells is Markdown. So any of this Markdown code will work in here. So if you ever wanted to embed something, like I don't know, some people like to embed GIFs. I'm not a big like GIF or meme user, but some people like to embed those in their notebooks just to like make it, I don't know, more fun. You can totally do that as well with the Markdown syntax for embedding images. Yeah. So that's how you would create a README.
Yeah. So I was always thinking that okay, here from here you either create the Markdown or the code. So there are two things in the Jupyter notebook itself. So with the Markdown, you create all your notes, and if you want to run a code and then make it into a let's say a PDF printable thing, then it becomes a README. That's what I was thinking.
I see. Yeah, not exactly. I think it's a little confusing because for our labs, the README is the same as our notebooks. So typically that's not the case. Typically the README just introduces what your project is. So you can see that for this example that I linked on the doc, this is not their notebook. This is really just a summary of what their project is about, so that like a recruiter or an employer can go and look at their project without having to go into each of the individual files, can see what their project was all about. Let's take a look at this other example. I think this is also very similar. You can see that, yeah, they summarized it a little bit differently. They put like the task, whatever they used, and then they talked about, because I think this was before when you had to create your own database for this project, which we don't have to do anymore now, thank goodness. But they were just talking about all of that, those processes. And so this has very little code. So unless you have a very specific function that you use that you want to share and that you think is very impressive, you can put that there. But for the most part, the README will have pretty much no code. So yeah, hope that answered your question.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Any other questions about READMEs?
Hey, I actually have a question about that graph with the circles. Did they use Seaborn for that?
Let me see. I would think so, because it looks like it's a Seaborn graph. But yes, it's called a bubble chart if you're interested in this graph.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, this is a cool one because you get to look at 3 variables all at once. So you have like your ratings, revenue, and the size of the bubble. Well, I guess size of the bubble is one thing, and also the color of the bubbles and other things. So they're looking at 4 variables all at once in one graph. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah. Any last questions? Or I guess overall questions about the project whatsoever?
So yeah, I'm actually, right, I'm still on cleaning as of now, because I mean, I could not do much work on the weekend, right? So now on 31st, right, we need to, before 31st, we need to submit the link, correct?
That's right. That's right. So on the 31st, or no, before the 31st, actually, it has to be before the 31st. You're going to go on to Learn, go on to this final project page, and then paste all of your things here. So your GitHub repo, your blog post, and the walkthrough. The walkthrough, as I mentioned, I can definitely record it for you all, and therefore you can put like a dummy link. Literally put any link there. It'll be fine because I'm the one that's reviewing this submission anyway, so I'll know. So yeah, you'll just do this and then
And
complete for
this
review.
link can be replaced, right, later on? The link?
This link,
Huh?
I don't know if you can change it, but then I'm the one that's reviewing your project, so I'll know. And plus, I'll send you that recording so that you can have your own recording as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So by 30th, I guess, because if you have to do it on 31st, right? So or maybe like by Saturday.
As long as you press this like I'm done button by the end of Sunday, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a task.
Oh yeah. If you need any help, just let me know. Any other questions so far? Cool.
I have a question. Like, if you're working on a project with a partner, how do you recommend doing it, the READMEs and the PowerPoint and all that type of stuff?
I think it kind of depends on how you're working on it. So I think most groups end up doing like, you do 2 questions, I do 2 questions. So for those parts, I think it would be helpful to talk about how you're gonna do it, and then so that it doesn't seem like it's 2 completely different people writing up the parts on the PowerPoint and the README. But definitely, like, I'd assume that you will just do the bulk of that work in terms of like, you know, the content that goes on PowerPoint, the content that goes on the README. You would just do whatever part that you work on. And then just really divvy it up.
Together somehow.
Sorry?
And then combine them and edit them somehow together.
Yeah. I just make sure it doesn't look like it's 2 completely different people. So like, don't use different. I've actually had one group in the past that they work so separately that their slide theme like changed halfway. So don't do that, because that makes it like really obvious that it's very disjointed, because I'm sure that, I mean, for this project, you guys have to work together at some collaborative capacity. So it should look like that. For the most part, I don't think that much work has to be put into synthesizing it to make it seem like it's like one person, but it's up to you. I've heard of groups that like one person does the presentation slides, one person does the README. Because I mean, the information on the README and the slides are actually very similar. So you can sort of work on it together. But yeah, I think, yeah, my recommendation would be like, because the bulk of it will be like your questions and your findings, you can definitely split that work up. And like for each question, it would only be like 2 or 3 lines, maybe 4 or 5 lines of like what you did. And then for the blog, you each have to write your own blog. Awesome. That's a good clarifying question. Anything else? Cool, awesome. In that case, we have another short session today, so I will post this video hopefully soon, because I think the last time it was like under half an hour. It got up pretty quick, so this should be up pretty soon. But yeah, as usual, any questions that you have, please let me know. But even better to put the questions in the Slack channel so everyone can see. But if there's nothing else, have a good night, everybody.
Howie?
There were 2 README examples. Where can we find those?
Ooh, so the README examples were in the project guidelines, which I'll post again.
Okay.
And they were these examples here.
Okay.
Both of them were made with this Markdown, whatever you were talking about
That's
earlier.
right. Yep.
So it's a website, or it's like a...
You can basically create those on GitHub, as well as like if you have a text editor, or on Jupyter. I walked through all of it earlier, so
Yeah.
so yeah, you can just see that there.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else? Cool. In that case, have a good night, everybody. Questions, just let me know. All right.
And
Bye,
Wednesday, what we are going to discuss? Thursday, coming Thursday.
Thursday is just gonna be general questions. There's nothing specific on Thursday.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.